Thank you for joining us for the Miami Valley Salute to Veterans. I'm Cindy LaPointe-Dafler, a volunteer host for the Miami Valley Communications Council. My husband was killed in Vietnam in 1969. He was posthumously awarded the Medal of Honor. Being around our veterans and talking with them, hearing their stories and their thoughts is my way of honoring my husband's legacy. We hope that hearing these memories from the veterans of our community will help us all better understand the dedication of those who have served. Today we're talking with Chaplain Stephen Wyke of Kettering, an Army veteran who served from 1961 to 1973. He will tell us the story of his time in the military. Thank you for being here with us today, Steve.
Thank you, Cindy.
I appreciate it. So, my first question is, when you went into the military, why did you go and why did you choose that branch that you chose?
As a kid, I always loved playing soldier. My mother was always getting on me about what I spent in the extra money on little soldiers, and I had battlefield scenes set up when I was 5 or 6, 7 years old. I've always been drawn to the military. When I was brought up in Norfolk, Virginia, around a lot of Navy guys, my parents would always invite the Navy guys home on the weekends to come and have a meal with us. And my brother at that time was in the Coast Guard. He retired, my older brother retired from the Coast Guard. So we had his buds from the Coast Guard, and the Navy guys coming in. And I was drawn to these guys. They had a lot of stories to tell. Marines were part of the Navy operations at that time. They were corpsmen and other activities with the Navy. And I got to meet some of those. So I was drawn to that environment. And my brother was in the Air Force. My other brother retired from the Air Force. And I spent a couple of years with him in Keesler Air Force Base in Mississippi. So I had the connection. So last year in high school, I talked to my mom. I was 17. I said, Mom, I want to go in the Army. She says, why the Army? You're Navy and Air Force and Coast Guard. I just want the Army. I always played with Army soldiers. She signed for me to go in the Army in 61 when I was 17. And that's how I got my start. And everything about it appealed to me.
Oh my gosh.
All the activities, the basic training. I had been trained in music, so I could play the trumpet. I knew all the bugle calls. I knew how to play the snare drums. So in basic training, Fort Gordon, Georgia, anybody play the trumpet here? Yep, I do. Anybody play the snares? I do. I couldn't believe nobody else in the unit did these things. So I was the company bugler, which was, I loved it, getting up early, getting my lip ready, and we played on a PA system to wake everybody up. March into places, playing the snare drums. It was part of me.
So you fit in naturally.
I felt drawn to it, and everything just came like I'd been there before.
So that was basic training?
That was basic training.
So what about your MOS and your advanced training?
After basic training, I signed up. My stepfather was in World War II and served with Patton's I think it was the 3rd Armor or something, 3rd Army. And he said, stay away from the infantry and the armor initially until you get exposed. So I signed up for Nike Herc, the missiles, the air defense system. And after basic, I went to Rocky Point, Long Island, New York. I think it was a 53rd Artillery Station out at the end of Long Island. And I was a missile crewman, learning how, OJT at that time.
OJT being?
On-the-job training,
okay.
Because I hadn't been sent to the missile school at, I think Fort Bliss, Texas, had the missile school there. I'm not quite sure. I think that was it. So after some time there at Rocky Point, Long Island, I got orders for Okinawa. So here I go. I turned 18 on Okinawa as a missile crewman, and I learned all the positions, the pit crewman, the topside guy hooking up the missiles and running drills. And I enjoyed that too, but I wanted more. I made PFC working as a crewman, got involved with some people-to-people programs in the village of Tancha, where I was trying to learn some Japanese, and come to find out that my houseboy at that time was actually the mayor of the village of Tancha. I couldn't believe it.
Oh my
This
gosh.
guy we paid just a few bucks a month for the locals to come in and do chores for
Sure.
us, keep our bunks made, shine our shoes, and it contributed to the economy. And my houseboy is Tomo Ishikawa. We call him Tommy. I called him Mr. Ishikawa after I found out who he really was.
Oh my goodness.
He invited me to come to his home, and it was an incredible introduction to the beautiful village of Tancha. And he had a lovely daughter, Ritsuko Ishikawa. And she was 15 and I was 17. So escorts stayed around close to us at all times.
Mm-hmm.
It was a wonderful experience being involved in providing some type of assistance to the villagers that were involved in providing labor and assistance for the men at the base. And I was there for a year and a half.
Okay.
And after I left there, I came back to the States and went to the south of LA in San Pedro. It was a Fort MacArthur, a small port, a fort that had been there for a long time. And I was sent there for about a few months. And believe it or not, they made me the morning report clerk, and I got to participate with the honor squad for parades. Honor squad sergeant was Pergy Larson, staff sergeant from Copenhagen, a very good man who taught us how to properly fold flags and present. Let us all take turns being the squad leader, posting colors. We had several events where we went down to Catalina Island for particular military celebrations, and got a chance to play color guard and also a rifleman, and also to lead some of the activities. It was just an exposure to everything. And they made me the company clerk because I taught myself to type when I was on Okinawa. I didn't want to be in the pit all the time pushing missiles around, so they said, well, go to Sukran, sign up for some admin classes. And then the only one that had to open at that time was typing, but you actually taught yourself. Someone came in and monitored you and got you set up, and you practiced learning where your keys were and all that good stuff. So Okinawa was an opportunity to prepare me for Fort MacArthur, California. And I volunteered for Vietnam. I made E4, Specialist 4 at Fort MacArthur, and I volunteered for Vietnam. Here I go. Ended up in Saigon with the ACFS J6.
And what year was this?
This was 1964, because I was my first tour was in 3 Corps, ACFS J6, Communications Electronics, and they asked for volunteers several times to go out with a MAC-SOG group to help provide a special operations group that was responsible for clearing some areas for placement of electronic materials, for testing the SATCOM, the satellite communication system.
So explain to the audience what clearing means.
We provided security. I was a pack animal for this one sergeant. I made E5, Specialist 5, so I carried his stuff for him, and he said, you're going to get exposed to special operations. I'm going to expose you to him. And here were a bunch of guys, some special forces guys, and also some other company guys from the Air America were there as well. And I liked what they were doing, the precision with which they performed their duties, their attitude, the camaraderie. And I got back I talked to my boss, Colonel Kimball of ACFS J6. He was an Air Force colonel. I said, I like this. He said, well, you want to go to OCS? I said, well, I never thought about that.
OCS, tell our audience.
Officers Candidate School
Right.
at Fort Benning, Georgia. Here I had an opportunity with the blessings of Colonel Kimball. I said, well, absolutely. So I made the test scores and all that so I could go, and I chose infantry. 6 months. So after my tour of duty, my first tour of duty in Vietnam, went right to Fort Benning, finished 6 months there, volunteered for airborne school. After we graduated from Officer Candidate School as second lieutenants, walked across the parade field, reported jump school. I signed up for Ranger and Special Forces, but I couldn't get Ranger school right away. I was sent to Fort Jackson, South Carolina, waiting on my assignment to go to Special Forces School at Fort Bragg, which is now, I think, Fort Liberty. They changed the names to these posts. So I was a range officer for several months there at Fort Jackson, South Carolina at Range 10. I got some experience in teaching weaponry, the M16. Then I got sent to Fort Bragg for the 12, 14 weeks, I forget what it was, for Special Forces training as a Green Beret. Very tough school, but what a bunch of dedicated and great guys. And I was drawn to Special Forces because of the logo, De Oppresso Liber, to liberate the oppressed.
Wow.
It's worn on the enlisted, wear the crest, and the officers have it on their epaulet. And on their blues, they'll have the logo on their badge here, De Oppresso Liber. And I like that idea. I did okay in school. After receiving my flash, the flash you put on your beret once you complete training, you get a 3 prefix. I went to Germany with the 10th Special Forces Group in Bad Tölz, right near the Bavarian border. And I spent a year there, some experience with the A team, which was the operational combat team, some staff experience. And I really loved it. I played the guitar, so we had a little band. We started for the weekends when we were free. And we had some celebrities come through. I think Charlie Pride was there. He came through and didn't have a band or something with him, but I think the guys, Ezor Valley Boys, that was this country group. So I think they provided a backup for Charlie Pride. So after a year there, I made first lieutenant in Germany. I got orders to go back to Vietnam with the 5th Special Forces Group. I spent 1 year, I made captain as soon as I arrived in Vietnam, up in Nha Trang. Sent down to Canto, where I was the political warfare advisor, S5, to the South Vietnamese Special Forces.
What did you do as in that position?
Well, we had operations we would go out on, but we also had a lot of administrative responsibilities. We set up study halls at each of our A camps for the Civilian Irregular Defense Group, the Vietnamese military guys we hired to work in our camps. So we set up, they called them reading and profit rooms, so that the men would have, they're there in these camps with their families anyway and their kids. So we would have something for them to do when they were off duty.
Oh, wow.
They could go and read and study and get certificates for completing certain levels of training and make it easier for them to get next promotions. And I love doing that. It's called civic action. That was my primary function that I enjoyed doing, even though we had combat operations. I thoroughly loved going into the villages and setting up village industries, getting sewing machines, getting tools for the farmers, setting up generators, power systems, little businesses within the various communities. And we had a lot of support from CARE, Cooperation for American Relief Everywhere. They provided us with anything we wanted.
Wow.
And it was just an incredible experience. I was drawn to that. And one of the awards I received from the Vietnamese government was a Civic Action Honor Medal for these things that we were able to do with my counterpart, my Vietnamese, Luc Long Doc Biec, Vietnamese Special Forces counterpart, with whom I worked and supported in all these things that we did there. It was an incredible year of accomplishments, of learning, some scary things. Yeah, life it's the hazards that come with it. There's a picture that I share many times. I forgot to bring one for Cindy today. Someone took a picture of me playing a guitar in combat with my fatigue song with all these little kids gathered around me. We would go out on met caps and dent caps. The dentists would go out and the local villagers check and see if they needed some repairs to the teeth. Medicines may be required for problems that the people may have. And it was just an incredible experience to get away from the lull, during the lull of battle, to get out involved with people to people. And that's where my heart really ventured to. I'm a soldier, and I'll always be a soldier, and I'll never regret being a soldier. But some of the parts of soldiering are more beneficial than others. And helping other people, processing POWs. We had a program, Cindy, that was incredibly important to me. It was called the Chu Hoi, Open Arms. We would invite our enemies, our VC or North Vietnamese, whoever were there, to come, lay down your weapons, come and see us, work with us, build this country up. And I think my staff, S5, was given a credit for about 889 Chu Hois. And some of these guys would come in and be transferred through training and be put in one of the camps to help protect the areas in which we were assigned for interdiction of supply and materials from the Ho Chi Minh Trail. But these guys turned out to be some incredible troops.
Wow.
And so I love that kind of stuff. When Tet came along, the Tet celebration, we made sure that every kid in these camps, B team, C team, and A teams, had a pack of goodies to celebrate the festival of Tet. And this stuff meant a lot to me. So I guess you can have the good, bad, and the ugly in a combat experience, but
Certainly.
you try to emphasize the good stuff. Because even when there's horrible things going on, you can always find something meaningful and uplifting and encouraging to get involved with. So that was my second year in Vietnam, which I've got no regrets. Came back to the States. I know everyone's heard about the movie We Were Soldiers with Mel Gibson playing the role of Colonel at that time, Hal Moore, of the battle that was fought against the VC division, I think, no, North Vietnamese division. I ended up working. I was at Fort Ord 4.5 years, and I had a chance to spend time with General Hal Moore and his beautiful wife. Incredible human beings. I guess Julie, I think is his wife's name. She and Martha Ray, the movie star and entertainer, were buddies.
Oh, wow.
Well, any Green Beret will tell you that Martha Ray is a big, important individual with every Special Forces soldier on the planet. She jumped. She was a paratrooper. She was a nurse during World War II, I think. And she was a colonel. And she qualified with a lot of the Green Beret stuff. And she visited us in Vietnam at our camps. And this incredible human being, here we are at Fort Ord. I said, let's have an Honor Maggie night. So we sent to Bel Air and flew her and her husband up to Fort Ord for a weekend. She sings beautifully. We put on a program. We had food, music. Maggie sang for everybody, and I was one of the escort officers for her during her visit to Fort Ord.
Wow.
And she would visiting the hospitals, seeing all the soldiers. I'm just an incredible human being. I have some pictures in my album of me with Maggie, and also in her uniform, because she was. You want to mess with Maggie when she's out in the field. That was a good 4.5 years I spent there. Commanded a special training company for General Moore.
Okay.
This special training company was actually the size of a battalion, 3 companies, because we had 3 major focuses. The Army had the Army Preparatory, APT, Army Preparatory Training. Mr. McNamara, Secretary of Defense, came up with this idea to bring into the service Project 100,000 personnel who would not normally meet the Cat 4.
What's that?
Category 4, when you're listed in the service, you were Category 1, the top, 2, 3, and 4 was the 80. A score of 80, which was you get in, but it's because you may have fallen asleep taking the test and just started guessing at stuff instead of spending time on your initial battery of tests when you entered into the service. And I think that's what usually happened. So all these folks, 100,000, were going to be labeled Cat 4, bring them in, retrain them, give them the educational requirements for high school, GED, half of the day, the second half of the day in military subjects. So they would do this for 6 to 8 weeks, and then they would move into basic training to finish up the basic training. The second program the general put me in charge of was MedRep. These were lawyers, doctors, people who were proficient and professionals, but they had a weight problem. So we had to bring their weight into conformity with the military regs so they could come on active duty and go and receive their commission, because they were all going to be officers anyway.
Oh my gosh.
And
if you're just joining us, this is Miami Valley Communications Council Salute to Veterans podcast. I'm your host, Cindy LaPointe-Dafler, and today we're talking with Army veteran Stephen Wyke.
The third program that I found very challenging was motivational. Kids going into the military, coming from the inner cities, or never had a lot of trouble with country boys, but sometimes the inner city kids had a problem adjusting to the discipline requirements.
Certainly.
So they get an attitude in basic training, and instead of discharging dishonorably, they would send them for a couple, 3 weeks to special training company, to motivational platoon, and we would encourage them, militarily speaking, of course, and try to return them through counseling, through extra physical work, to encourage them to get back into basic, because we did not want to turn out a lot of dishonorably discharged young people. That wasn't the focus of any of the commanders that I worked with. We wanted to do everything within our power to prepare you, finish your 2 years, get all your benefits that are due you, and become a good citizen and be active. And we were very successful with this motivational platoon. We borrowed some of the stuff from the Marines down at the special branch in San Diego. They gave us advice on how to do it.
Yeah.
And the Marines could do a little bit more than we were permitted to at our unit. But we did have success with all 3 programs. We had one guy, he was a legal mind person, legal professional, very large individual. And I used to call him the judge. I'd harass him, give him a little friendly harassment, because I knew these guys were going to be leaders and probably outrank me. Put them through the training. They dropped weight. We had supervision to make sure we didn't overdo it. We had professionals guiding their dietary requirements, monitoring them so we didn't produce heart situations. And I'm in the orderly room a knock came. I heard somebody yell out in the orderly room, "Attention." And I said, well, somebody higher than a captain just came in because I'm the captain here. I ran out and saluted this major in full uniform, and it was the judge. And I'm going, you made it. And he grabbed me and gave me a big hug and thanked me for working with him because he really wanted to be in the military. He's a wonderful, wonderful human beings, and I love that. After 4.5 years, I had some staff time there. During that 4.5 years, I worked with a Major Lorca. I was his assistant S3 trainee, and also the S2, which is physical security and personal security. We had to provide security not only for our area, our weapons that we used in training, but we also had to keep the security clearances updated for the permanent party personnel. And the last unit I worked with was Training Command under Colonel Naughton, Francis Naughton, a wonderful commander. Full bird. He was more of a friend than my commander, and I deeply admire him and appreciate his professionalism. He's very helpful. And then Colonel Kirker called me to his office, and he said, I had hoped to sign the papers to send you to the career course in Washington, but you have been chosen to be fired, reduction in force.
Oh, my.
Laid off. They had too many infantry captains, and I wasn't regular Army. I was reserve on active duty.
Oh.
If you go through OCS, you're usually a reserve officer on active duty. If you're West Point, then you're a regular. And if you're ROTC, you can apply, as can the OCS guy, to become regular Army. But I didn't do that. And I should have, but I didn't. So anyway, that's my story. And I was separated in 73, August of 73 as a captain. And I stay in touch with the military. I enjoy going and teaching leadership principles in reserve units and being there for promoting young sergeants who are responsible. The sergeants were very responsible for my success during the 12 years I was on active duty. So I love to go and participate in re-enlistments in reserve units for non-commissioned officers. And I have my own grandson who is hoping to be E8 Master Sergeant at Fort Bliss, Texas. And I'm flying out as soon as he gets the word, and I'm going to pin that boy.
I've seen those pinning ceremonies.
Well, this will be done copacetic. This will be proper.
Okay.
Yeah, because he's our oldest grandchild, and I'm very proud of him, watching him over the years go through his promotions.
Oh, that's great.
So it was a wonderful 12-year career, and I would do it again.
Tell me about, you were released, and where did you go? You came home to your...
When I got out in 73, I was having some problems with I was having some blood bleeding from the right lung. And I had to go to the VA. They checked me out, and I had trachea esophageal fistulas, holes between my trachea and esophagus, and food had been permitted to lodge within my lobe, and they had to take that abscess part out in 74. And 10% service connected. But even after I got hired with private business, I would still go out to the VA because they had all my medical records there. And over the years, I qualified for other things that came up related to military experience, granted me full benefits in 2012 when I was granted 100% from the VA. So I'm happy, and I can still work at the VA as a volunteer with the Honor Squad when I can. I'm having some knee trouble right now, so I'm trying to modify the brace so I can get back on the line with my troops out there. And I work with Cindy. I work with you at the AVHC.
Explain to our audience what the Honor Squad does and how they can help.
We're always looking for Honor Squad members, candidates. You don't have to be a service-connected veteran. If you're a civilian and you're interested in learning to perform duties as a rifleman and to give last final salutes to those who served honorably. We're looking for recruits to come and help us. We use the M1 Garand, which is 9.5 pounds, and we'll take some time with you and show you all the precisions, what we do. You'll work with people who are veterans and who are non-veterans and learn the process for giving these final salutes and honors for our veteran. You can work 1 day a week, 1 day a month, whatever time you have available. Well, we provide you with your uniform, and you're given a meal there at the on campus at the VA. It's an opportunity to develop the camaraderie. We have retired firemen who come, medics who come, civilians who come who only had exposure to military through a relative, but they want to serve, and they ask, can we do this? Yes, you can do it. And it works real well. I think we have 50-some volunteers, and Monday through Friday, we provide full military honors due an honorably discharged veteran.
Specifically at the Dayton National Cemetery.
The Dayton National Cemetery. We don't go off campus.
Right.
We have VFW posts that take care of the off-campus stuff, and they have their own honor squad. So I would like to invite you to give us a call, the Volunteer Service Office at Dayton National Cemetery, and we'd love to have you. And I hope to be back on board very soon myself after I get my knee taken care of. But it's been a great experience working with these guys.
How long have you been doing it?
I was doing volunteer work right after my surgery in '74 for the tracheoesophageal fistula.
Mm-hmm.
I played a guitar, so I'd provide musical programs. I helped with an organization, Volunteers of America, for a while. And I would go out visiting the patients in their rooms as a chaplain. I would go do my chaplain's duty. And with the VFW post, I'd go out with them for bingo. And I still do that. When they get the bingo thing going again, we'll still do that. The VA has been a big part of my life because I've had so many procedures over the years out there, and they've kept me alive. So I think there's something special out there, Cindy.
Yeah,
Cindy?
I guess so. Tell me about being a chaplain. How did you come about that?
A couple years before getting out of the military, I went and put in my paperwork and talked to General Moore about transferring from the infantry to the chaplain's corps, and he kind of had a little chuckle with me. He goes, "Mama, no," he wouldn't approve it. And he says, "You're an infantry officer, and let these other guys become chappies." But I went ahead with a group. We organized outreach chaplaincy with about 124 people. We started an organization, and it was incorporated in California. And I was ordained by the group as an interfaith outreach chaplain. And we're also authorized to ordain others. It doesn't matter what faith they are. It's interfaith.
Right.
So if it's Christian, Jew, Muslim, it doesn't matter. If you have something you want to do in service to other people, our charter permits us to ordain within our state those who would like to serve, but somehow are confronted with barriers that keep them from doing what they want to do.
So did that start after you were out of the military?
I got out of the military, and I started doing weddings and memorials and on my own as an independent. My rabbi and we talk. I don't compete with him. So if we have members of the various communities, and even some of my Christian pastor friends, they ask me not to compete with them. I said, no, I'm independent. I don't have an organization building and all this. I'm independent. We go out, and if you guys can't take care of it, I will. So I think I've performed weddings for about 70 some people since 77.
Wow.
So, because I had some health issues to deal with for a couple of years.
Sure. Oh my gosh, that's amazing.
And I still do that today. I promote the military, especially the special forces, I learned so many lessons as a young man. I believe every young person in our country can benefit by a couple years on active duty, not necessarily combat, because for every combat position, there are hundreds of people supporting it.
Absolutely.
So you don't need to do that. There's plenty of vacancies out there in the tech fields today. I was talking to one of my couple Green Berets I met who were in Afghanistan. I said, compared to the weapons you use, we had bows and arrows and blowguns. The high tech that the kids are working with today is something that it doesn't put you right in harm's way every time, unless you choose that.
Right.
You choose Navy SEAL, yeah, you're going to have some experience. But the tech field that's open in all the services give you an opportunity to spend 2 years learning and developing that camaraderie that is only, as Cindy will tell you too, it's only within that structure, because you have a camaraderie with firemen, with police officers. It's just an amazing fraternity, because you're working with people who've been there, got the T-shirt and the hat.
Absolutely.
So to speak.
You have joined veteran organizations, I'm sure.
When I retired from Honda in 2009, I was recruited by the Marvin Adams, a friend of mine, recruited me to become the chaplain at 6557, which is up in Pleasant Hill, VFW. Second and third shifts over the years prevented me from being involved with any organization other than name or support, financial support only. So I was the chaplain up at 6557 from 2010 till about a year ago, and then district chaplain for a couple of years, 3rd District of the VFW. And recently I transferred to Beaver Creek, where I'm just taking it easy and circling the wagons so I can get more involved with the AVHC, which we're involved with. I think that's going to be a biggie with all the stuff going on for our veterans, with the archive coming to the Dayton area, the statues, the proposed funeral tunnel, and all this good stuff, making this is going to be an amazing historical place, even greater than it is already.
Yes.
So,
absolutely.
So yes, the VFW has been part of my life for a long time.
That's great. Are you in touch with the people that you had served with in the past?
I just called last night to my executive officer during my second tour in Vietnam. He was a Lieutenant Doug Knott when I was his captain, and we served a year together at Delta Company in Canton. And we stay in touch. We took a cruise to Europe together a few years ago. His wife, Josephine, and my wife, they like each other. Doug's liberal and I'm conservative, so we have some very interesting discussions. We're going to have a little wager on who takes this next election, but we don't hate each other. Doug and I went through a lot of tough times together, and he's experiencing some challenges right now. I think he's three years older than I am. I just turned 80, so Doug's 3 or 4 years older than I am. But I was his boss, but I was his friend. And he said that to me one time. He said, "You were my friend." I said, "Yeah, you got a lot done too."
Yeah.
So I'm in touch with him. There are other SF officers. They have a list. Some guy tries to connect them. He's operating out of Texas and tries to connect these service members together. So I did talk to my TAC officer from OCS, Lewis Forrest, about 5 years ago. I called him and talked to him, and the only question he asked me right away was, "How many push-ups can you do?" Because he used to wear us out. And I still see his page pop up on Facebook once in a while. And
Is there anything you have always wanted to share about your service or veteran experience that you haven't?
I'm pretty open. There was a period of time there where I was less willing to share things, but over the years, it becomes easier when you write about stuff you've been through, when you share it, when you go out and speak about it. And I'm speaking coming up next. I think it's coming up in November. I'll be speaking on PTSD before a group of Jewish war veterans with Dr. Taylor, a psychologist, who will be presenting that topic and what some of the veterans have gone through. We try to work with our brothers and sisters and direct their attention to someone with the credentials to help them weather this storm when they start being troubled by a service-connected event. And we're reading with Mission 22 to 23 veterans every day commit suicide. We want to do something about this. We really want to get the help, and the help is at the VA. They have the facility there. They have the professionals there, and we know who they are. So don't hesitate. If you're struggling with something that happened a long time ago and it won't go away, you get out to the VA and you ask for help and step up to the plate, and a new door will open to you. Many of us have been through this thing. We were given the encouragement and we faced our responsibilities, and we didn't want handouts. We were soldiers, but sometimes soldiers need a little R&R too.
Absolutely.
And they'll give it to you. You'll get that. Our local Veterans Administration's got some wonderful people there.
That's good to know. That's good to know. What would you like people to remember from your story?
There's always hope and purpose. So no matter what you're going through, you're in charge. You can make it turn out better. So don't give up just because life is flawed anyway. I don't know of any life that's been perfect. And I've traveled the world over with these units, and there's beautiful people everywhere, and there's difficult people everywhere, and there's struggles everywhere. In my own encouragement to people as an outreach chaplain, I remind them life is flawed. You're flawed. We're all flawed, but we've been given the opportunity to improve ourselves and to perfect ourselves because we're the ultimate decision maker on what direction we take ourselves. Yeah. And I've worked with veterans who had serious problems, limbs missing, scars all over them, but their attitudes infuse me with life because they are not quitters. So that's what I would say. Let's go forward, continue perfecting ourselves, helping each other live this precious life as long as we're above dirt.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Steve. I really appreciate you coming in and participating in our podcast. And
my honor. I appreciate everything you're doing for the vets, too.
Thank you.
Especially the service that your husband gave.